In the headlines, changes in Congress and at the local level. Tonight, our editorial roundtable reviews the results of Election Day 2010. This is What Matters. Good evening, I'm Cathy Lewis. Portsmouth has a new mayor, and the 2nd District changes parties again. The 2nd was one of the races that helped the Republican Party take control of the House of Representatives, including several seats in Virginia. Joining us this week to consider the results of this week's election, Kimball Payne, political reporter with the Daily Press, the Virginian-Pilot's editorial page writer Shawn, and from the political blogging community, we're joined once again by Democratic blogger Vivian Paige and Republican blogger Brian Kirwin. Good to have all of you with us tonight. I started to say Republican blogger and gloater after Tuesday night.
Is the gloat cam ready?
The gloat cam. I love it. So big sweep for the Republicans Tuesday night.
Fantastic. Nationwide, Virginia. Not a big surprise in the 2nd. We were pretty confident. But the race with Morgan Griffith out, with Rick Boucher, everybody scratching their head when we saw those early returns. We're like, well, that's not going to hold up, and boy, it did. Then the other states, 56 seats is the number that I saw.
Yeah. But you say that actually
60.
It's your take that more importantly than the House of Representatives is the governorships, the number of governorships that were.
Well, that's a story that's not being reported very much. In Virginia, we kind of don't really pay attention that much because our gubernatorial races, our legislative races are on the odd number of years. Most other states don't do it that way, and we now Republicans hold more state legislatures today than in any point in history since 1928. 19 state legislators flipped on Tuesday. It went from Democrat majority in the country to Republican majority in the country. 6 to 8 governorships went net from Democrat to Republican. We have a majority of governors in the country that are Republican. First time in a while that's been true. We won states like Michigan and Wisconsin, things we hadn't seen in 15 years go Republican. The old Rust Belt, Pennsylvania, going Republican. The Reagan states are turning Republican.
What do you think is the one issue that, was there one issue that turned?
What I see, when you have states like that are turning, not just Virginia. Virginia turning Republican is not exactly groundbreaking news. But when states from New Jersey last year to Pennsylvania to Wisconsin to Michigan are turning Republican, it's economic. It's a bunch of blue-collar guys saying, I vote the party and I ain't got a job. I ain't happy with the way things are, change. And I think we're seeing a lot of that Reagan-Carter, Reagan-Democrat kind of voters who are saying, I'm willing to give anybody a try who gets me a job.
None of the above, or anybody but what's currently there. Yeah.
Anybody who can make things better.
So, Vivian, as you look at this, it's a tough night for your party. Tuesday night?
Not quite unexpected, but it certainly, except for the race out in the 9th, not really unexpected, but definitely not a good night for Democrats.
So what do you attribute? You wrote a blog about entry about why you think Glenn Nye lost this race in the 2nd.
It was very clear to most of us who had been on the ground for a long time that Glenn was not doing what was necessary to keep Democrats engaged over the last 18 months, 2 years.
Such as?
Such as anything at all. Not.
So it wasn't just about the health bill?
It wasn't just about a health bill. I mean, it was a lot of things. There were a number of he didn't hold any town hall meetings on health care, unlike Tom Perriello out in the 5th, who held one over and over again. He surrounded himself with people who are not necessarily local folks, and so the reach out to the local Democrats just simply wasn't there.
You write that he really, in your view, he relied entirely too heavily on his chief of staff, who ran him to the right, very far to the right, had him making decisions. And it's not like this was the first time she'd run a candidate this way, because she'd done it to another candidate out in California, of all places, run a congressman who really should have been moderate. I mean, we understand the 2nd Congressional District is not a D+5 district. It's not a district where you got raving liberals in it. But you also have, we're very pragmatic. Those Democrats who are in the 2nd are very pragmatic about what our congressman has to do in order to get reelected. One thing the congressman can't do is he can't throw mud in our faces.
And he can't slap us on a regular basis and tell us how independent he is. He can't remind us daily how he didn't vote for anything that we held dear. So how do you get Democrats to come out and vote for somebody who says, oh, well, you know, I'm a D, so therefore you should vote for me, even though I didn't vote with you or for you when it was an opportunity to do so.
Yeah, I had written about that earlier. I think his whole campaign strategy was to say, I'm not your problem. I realize you're angry, guys. I'm not the problem. But what voters said is, well, you're not our solution either.
Well, and he had ample opportunity for not just during this election cycle, but he had 18 months of being in office before he was running hard to do something. I called it throwing a bone. He had to do something to energize the Democratic base. All you had to do was look at the numbers. When he lost Norfolk, he won my precinct, interestingly enough, but when you lose Norfolk, you're going to lose.
And it was even beyond that, because not only did they give up on the Democratic voters, they figure, okay, now he's going to get what he's going to get. Our strategy is going to be try to split the Republicans between Ridgel and Kenny Golden, so that, you know, our 41% may be enough to win. You know, it's a losing strategy from the beginning.
Absolutely. So Kimball Payne, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say there was just no energy on that side. And Vivian's got a laundry list, but I think the healthcare vote encapsulated it, because he's running ads against this healthcare vote, and you're trying running ads about voting against healthcare at the same time to try and whip up a Democratic base. And you look at the numbers, and you know, for all the talk of a Republican wave, for all the talk about a conservative movement, Scott Ridgel got fewer votes than Thelma Drake did in that district in 2006. Thelma Drake got almost 1,800, almost 1,000 more votes than Scott Ridgel did. So this isn't a redefined district. No. This is not, you know, some unsurmountable tide that the Democrats in the second can't get back. But in terms of messaging, I mean, Glenn was, you know, almost 20,000 votes down from where he'd been. You know, where he needed to be, rather. There's no way he's going to make up that ground by being a conservative voice running as a Democrat.
Well, we're glad to have Shawn Day with us tonight. He's an editorial page writer for the Virginian-Pilot. Good to have you, Shawn.
Well, thanks for having me.
And we should note that Don Lozado is alive and not very well. He's ill, and so Shawn was nice enough to come in and pinch hit, which I thought was pretty funny, because I was kind of looking forward to you and Shawn, you and Don sitting next to each other. So Shawn, I apologize, but you're going to have to kind of.
You have to throw some pokes.
That's right. But you know, it's very interesting, because and I think you wrote the editorial, if I'm not mistaken. Your editorial page endorsed Glenn Nye last time around, and this time endorsed Scott Ridgel. What changed your mind?
Right. Well, this time there were issues of leadership that particularly came to the forefront for us. Leadership and engagement of his constituents. Vivian mentioned the health care debate. That was really a critical point that we considered. Because he didn't engage his constituents in that point, everyone was looking for some sort of discussion, some sort of leadership, an indication of which way he would go. He waited until the night before the vote, and he really deprived his constituents of an opportunity there to engage him and to talk to him about it in a public setting.
And I think he was also criticized because he waited so late in the day to make the vote, when it really, what do you think about that?
I have to tell you that the Democrats had their huge JJ dinner the night before
Jackson Day dinner.
Before the health care vote. And so you've got all these Democrats from across the state that are in Richmond for this event. Glenn snuck in through the kitchen, went up on stage, made his speech, went back out, and went back out through the kitchen. He never once engaged a single person in that audience. And when everybody's trying to figure out how he's going to vote the next day, as the event broke up, his email came out saying that he was going to vote against it. He didn't even have the guts to do it while he was there.
Yeah, but we're talking about some, you know, engaging the public. You look at Tom Perriello engaged the heck out of his district, and he still got sent out on a rail.
But you still have a responsibility to engage.
Oh, listen, I'm not saying I'm.
Yeah,
I'm
but
all
look at the difference between the two. Look at the difference between the number of votes cast. Look at the difference between the margins. Perriello loses by 3. That's the wave. That's the part that took Rick Boucher out in the 9th. Glenn Nye loses by 11. So it's a big difference that, you know, if by doing that, if it hadn't been for the wave, Perriello would have still been in, Rick Boucher would have still been in, Glenn Nye still would have been out.
Tom Perriello is still holding town halls, and it's still not getting him back in Congress.
So let me ask you this about the span on the vote, because there was a poll that came out just a couple of days before the election saying it was a virtual dead heat, or very, very close. Vivian is smiling knowingly.
Well,
but
you look at an incumbent, if you're the guy who's in office and you find out a week out that you're at 41%.
So you're only neck and neck.
You're only neck and neck. Not only that, but you've been behind throughout the entire campaign, and there's, you know, whatever side of the political spectrum you're on, nobody was denying that the conservatives had the momentum. So undecideds are naturally going to break towards Ridgel. So you see that poll, and even Nye's people were like, "Hey, it's a dead heat." You know, it was like
more dead than heat.
Right. I mean, it was like, you know, squeaking out of their lungs.
I honestly don't. I know it's conventional wisdom that undecideds break for the challenger, but thanks to Nate Silver and 538, we know that that's not the case. When I saw those numbers come out and I saw the number of undecideds, and I went back and looked at what Nate had written about the fact that undecideds don't break, given certain circumstances. I even called Brian and we talked this through.
Oh, come on, you called Brian?
I
don't
called
believe
Brian and we talked it through. It was a situation where we were both going, you know, he could pull this thing off. Nye literally could pull this thing off, purely because when you do the historical work, you discover that undecideds don't break to the challenger the way people think.
But isn't it a point, though, that if you are not any higher than that in that...
No, and actually that's another thing
that
that
Nate... for 10 seconds?
Yeah, please. I'd be very interested.
If you're late in a race, undecideds will break against an incumbent early on, but when you're in the closing 10 days, if you're still undecided, and Dick Morris wrote about this in a column called The Myth of the Undecided Voter, if you're undecided, you're not showing up. If you're undecided after a full-blown campaign and you're like, well, gee, I don't decide, I'm not sure which one I'm voting for, you're probably going to blow off the race and not show up. And so you're not counted, and suddenly 45 to 41 on election day becomes 53 to 47.
That's exactly
because the undecided voters don't show up.
And the under 50% argument, again, going back to what Nate has done, he went all the way back and looked at races going all the way back to 1980. So I mean, he had the historical data, and the key is that you can be under 50% and still win, provided you are leading the race.
If you're ahead.
And so
because when the undecideds don't show, you norm over 50.
Exactly. He says so what happens is that if you're behind, if you're way behind, you can't make it up. There's no making it up. So the fact that they were statistically in a dead heat meant, if the margin had been different, with the fact that they were in a statistical dead heat, when I saw those numbers and looked at them, there were some problems that I saw in the crosstabs that made me question the numbers.
Okay.
But if you were just looking at the numbers, and since this district hasn't been polled very much, we didn't have much to go on, that it was was he could pull it off. And I was just shaking my head going, how is this real?
Yeah, and I don't know that you would have been happy even if that had happened.
You know, happy or not, I was afraid of what it might do. It might send the wrong message. If Nye had won, it would have sent the message that said that this style, this operation, what he had undertaken for the last 2 years was the way to go for the next 2 years. There was nothing that was going to jerk him back to reality and say, do things differently.
Yeah. What were you hearing, Shawn Day, in terms of letters to the editor and your website and the commentary that was there around this business of why, what Vivian's talking about, that Democrats felt in some respects abandoned?
Well, I mean, that was all over the place. I mean, we've got several letters like that, and we've got several comments on just about every story where you would see people express that kind of opinion about Glenn Nye. That was particularly present on Twitter during the campaigning of the race, and that was actually one area where Glenn Nye's campaign was noticeably absent on Twitter, and Scott Ridgel's campaign had just totally dominated it and really beat up on him. I mean, he was really beaten up in terms of the conversation there.
So so next time you were at the news conference, the Scott Ridgel news conference after the victory.
Right.
Tell us what he said.
Well, I mean, he he laid out a handful of reforms that he's going to personally champion in Congress. He wants to end franking privileges, which is where lawmakers can send out mail pieces. It kind of blurs the line between campaigns and just pure legislation. He doesn't want to participate in the pension fund, wants to ban staffers in his office from working for lobbying shops for 5 years, or himself. He wants to end a self-imposed term limit of 12 years. I mean, there's a whole laundry list of bits and pieces that he wants to do to kind of change the culture in Washington. The more powerful thing that I heard Scott say was, you know, I think the public's given the Republican Party another chance, and I think we have one chance to get this right on deficit spending. And debt was something that we heard a lot about. Deficit spending was something we heard a lot about here from, you know, not only from the Tea Party movement, but from conservatives. But I think that's, you know, Scott pointed that out as a place where they need to hold the line, and I'm wondering if the Republican Party is going to be able to come up with any sort of manageable way to reduce spending in a meaningful way without just trying to offer fat-free chocolate cake to everybody. And that's what you're going to get from the leadership that you're hearing in Washington, D.C., where Speaker in Waiting, House Speaker in Waiting, John Boehner, is saying, well, the president legislates, you know, we're just here to react to it. And that's, you're thinking, wait, you just won 56 plus seats and you just want to sit there and react because you're so scared that you don't know what to do over the next 2 years that you'll blow any chance in the presidential race.
Know what they'll do. They do. The House Republicans will throw things to the Senate and wait for it to either get voted down or vetoed or bottled up.
Nothing that will really meaningfully address
and then the Democrats will be your party of no.
It's going
nothing that will meaningfully address debt, though.
No.
I mean, what are you going to do what is the party going to do to meaningfully address debt when you won't, when you want to reduce deficit spending by cutting taxes? You know, you've got these ideas out there that don't mesh with each other. It's like we're going to reduce the deficit. Well, if we cut all the
entitlement programs, then we can, you know, and I'm talking their talking points now. If we cut all the entitlement programs,
we can't use the Virginia model. We had the largest tax increase in Virginia history, and we still had deficits. So raising taxes doesn't solve the problem.
I didn't say I'm talking about the pure mathematical logic of dealing with debt and deficit, and the reality that the sacred cows for both sides are things that they will never tell people.
And therein lies the problem.
There is no way to trim government spending that does not involve trimming government spending.
And so that means everything would be on the table, except that defense is not on the table, and Social Security is not on the table because, you know, so I heard Scott Rizzo tell people, you know, Social Security is not an entitlement. You worked for it. Okay.
Well, and the other thing you heard Scott say over and over again on the campaign trail, massive deficit spending isn't the path to job creation. And in the next breath, he's defending Joint Forces Command, which is massive government spending that created jobs in his district.
Well, his point was, if it's going to go away, that's one thing. If it's just going to go away to go to Florida, how much money are you saving? And is that a political move or a financial move?
Well,
they're making it a political move.
Absolutely, but the other thing is, as long as you take off the table defense spending, entitlement spending, and say because you're pandering, right? I mean, let's talk reality.
Yeah, and let's look at the list of government cuts that the Democrats proposed. They had the White House, they had the House against the Senate.
I didn't say that.
They got their
but
list.
We're not in charge anymore. So now y'all get.
You got 2 out of 3, baby. You got 2 out of 3.
Yeah, but the House is
want to hand charge to each other.
Yeah, but the House is where the bills come from.
No, it's yours.
No, it's your baby now.
You got 2 out of 3.
It's your baby now.
Obama's going to have to sign or veto.
But see, this is interesting because I remember we had Larry Sabato on maybe about a year ago about his book where he talked about the fact that the requirement to run every 2 years for the House in this culture is just not enough time to get something done, that you have to turn around and start running and start raising money the day after you're elected. And his argument was for 3-year House terms, where you could actually...
Larry Sabato's part of the problem.
Well, okay.
He's part of that insulated class that says, you know, gosh, these poor politicians, they need more terms. They need longer terms. It's too hard for them.
Well, let me just ask you this,
You've got one problem. You got 60 people going up there, and I think Scott Rizzo's one of them. They say, you know, I don't need to be in Congress to feel good about myself. I got a business, I got a family, I don't have to be here. I think they're happy if they can go up, make changes, and come home in a few years. I don't think they want to be in there for a lifetime.
Okay. He spent $5 million for what is it? I mean,
2 years.
We know at least $2 million.
$2 million out of his own pocket.
That we know
to get there and make changes and come home a patriot? Yes, I think so.
Let me ask you this, though, because the Democrats got beat up this time around, and Bill Clinton said, look, took a long time to get here. Don't give us just 2 years to fix this problem. How are the Republicans not going to?
The budget was balanced within 3.
You know, I think that's. You know what I think?
Republicans didn't even vote for the balanced budget amendment back during Clinton years.
That's right.
Yes, they did.
No Republicans voted for it.
More Republicans voted for the balanced budget amendment than the Democrats did. Were you kidding? That was killed in the Senate. It passed the House.
No, but it was before when Bobby Scott and the rest of them were.
1995. It passed the House. It passed the Republican
We'll fact check.
We'll have to fact that. We need to fact check.
The only thing that didn't pass the House was the term limits.
We'll fact check that, and it'll be 2 weeks. We'll get the answer to you in 2 weeks.
The bigger problem is that I don't want to hear this excuse that you've only got 2 years. I don't want to hear it.
Okay.
Because I remember talking to Shirley Chisholm in 1981, just after Ronald Reagan and the Reagan Revolution took place. And what Ronald Reagan and the Republicans did in the first 18 months of running things up in Washington was unprecedented in terms of what they were able to accomplish. They were single-minded. They were focused. We're going to do boom, 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 and they did it.
And they didn't have the House.
Okay. Now we have the Democrats who go in and say, "Oh, we got to pander to this person. Let's compromise. Let's talk about bipartisanship." You know, that stuff works if the other side is willing to listen. As soon as they said no, they should have rammed everything right on through anyway. They were going to pay for it. Democrats were going to pay for it this year. We all knew it. They were going to lose anyway. They might as well have done the right thing.
What do you think?
They were going to lose anyway.
Exactly.
A lot of them were people they shouldn't have won anyway. There are a lot of districts that came along with Obama that were going to go away as soon as Obama wasn't on the top of the ticket anyway.
So who do the Democrats run in the second next time around? Because it is only 2 years. Who do the Democrats
They got a pretty
run?
short bench. They got about 2 or 3 people.
Well, you don't know
Can
what
you
the
name
district's
all of
gonna
them?
You don't know what the district's going to look like.
Correct. That's the key.
And this is a key point.
Because all of the districts are probably going to make a little bit of a move north because of the population
After the census and they redraw the
right, because they're redrawing districts next spring. So you're going to see, probably Bobby Scott's district, I think, needs more voters. The second needs more voters. I mean, you're going to might see the first shift up. I mean, I don't have the computer models.
So maybe they'll draw these districts so they go up to Maryland or something, because honestly, the shape of them is.
You might see the second cross the line into Chesapeake.
Yeah, but you
might see the second cross the line into Chesapeake.
Well, it depends on what Randy Forbes gives up and whether he gives up Petersburg and gets Portsmouth back.
I don't think he wants Portsmouth back.
I know he doesn't. I know he doesn't. But I hear that part of the drawing is give Portsmouth back to Randy and give Petersburg over to Bobby Scott. And anyway, it's all.
So those are the conversations. Those are the conversations that are underway now.
They are, but they can't be final.
I was going to say
numbers.
They've got projections.
They got projected
know
numbers.
Pretty much where it's going to wind
That's
up.
correct.
Short bench for the Democrats.
Very short.
It's got to be someone with a ton of money.
Fundamentally, and again, me and Brian have all these conversations, but fundamentally, there's a difference between the Democrats and Republicans.
Just one.
And one major.
We win.
No. Oh, yeah, right. Yeah. So you can say that now. There's one fundamental.
But you don't want to be in charge.
That's right. There's one.
You just said you don't want to be in charge.
There's one big difference between Democrats and Republicans, and that is that Democrats are candidate-driven and Republicans are party-driven. And as long as you are candidate-driven and not party-driven as a party, then your bench is always going to be more shallow. Republicans believe in building a bench. Democrats believe in building candidates.
I'll totally concur. That's been true for decades.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
The Democrats will draw their line and create their power structures according to the people that they have active, and the party will make decisions that will make the party thrive.
I really appreciate all of you being here. Shawn, I'm so sorry we didn't get to hear from you much, and I do apologize about that.
All right.
But you can see what the fray is like here, and it was brave of you to jump into this today. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Now, I know you all wrote an editorial about the new Portsmouth mayor.
Yes.
And a very complimentary editorial, saying that he really seems to be a consensus builder and somebody who's going to do great things for the city.
I think everyone in Portsmouth is hopeful for him.
Well, we'll be back in just a moment with a final thought about that very race. I have to confess, I didn't spend a whole lot of time in this election cycle focused on the Portsmouth mayor's race. After all, there were 6 candidates in the race at one time. I don't live in Portsmouth, but I figured I could trust the good people who live there to elect the person that they think will get the job done. And so the day after the election, our fabulously dedicated producers got new Mayor Kenny Wright to spend a few minutes with us on our daily radio talk show.
Well, the first call out of the box was from a Smithfield man who said that he was glad we were going to be talking with Mayor Wright. He wanted our listeners to know that he had worked with Kenny Wright at an area shipyard and that the new mayor had tutored him in math so successfully that he pulled a B in the course. He went on to say that Wright was a generous person and he wanted our listeners to know that they were getting a terrific new mayor. Kenny Wright is 47 years old and he launched a company that has grown by leaps and bounds. But what struck me most about Wright is his positivity. Of course, the city has issues, some of the most contentious around race. But Mayor Wright told our audience that he had gone to school with white children and his experience was that racial tension was not as intense as it's been described. He talked about the need to bring the city together, to be honest and transparent, and engage his residents in dealing with the challenges that face that city. I told him about the earlier call from the colleague he'd tutored, and he said it made him feel good to know that he had helped someone else. Portsmouth's been in the grip of a leadership drama for several years, and it's good to see that its new director seems firmly committed to moving Portsmouth confidently into its next act. Well, what are your thoughts about this past week's election? We want to hear from you. There are lots of ways that you can reach us here at What Matters. On our website, it's whatmatters.tv. You can watch this program and any of our other past ones there. Drop us an email, join us on Facebook, and we'll be glad to let you know what we are working on if you will let us know your email address. Thanks for watching, and for more local talk, I hope you'll join us on the radio dial on Hearsay on 89.5 WHRV. We're live every weekday from noon to 1. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you again for another look at What Matters.